The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank everyone for joining me today for the webinar covering the introduction of everRun Monitor. My name's Bob Boulay. I'm the Director of Product Management here with Marathon Technologies, and most of you know me or have spoken to me before or have attended previous webinars, and I want to thank you guys for taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit more about what we're doing with our monitoring product. A couple of housekeeping items before I jump in. I am going to be recording this session, and we'll be making it available to partners, making it available via the partner portal, and also sending everyone out an email with a link to a recording of the session as well. So if you miss any part of it, or if you have a colleague that wasn't able to attend, you certainly can pass that along to him or her. The other piece of housekeeping before we jump in is any questions at all, feel free to enter them directly into the GoToWebinar client. This is not an interactive phone session, so I won't be able to hear you if you ask questions, but you certainly can forward those questions via the chat client, and we'll save some time at the end of the presentation to try and get to as many of these as possible. And if for some reason you ask a question and I don't answer it here live, I will follow up with you. I'll shoot you an email. I have a record of all the questions that get asked and who asks them. So I'll be able to follow up with you, shoot you off a quick email, and let you know the answer to your question. With that said, I kind of want to jump right in. And just the format of today's webinar, I've got three, and I promise, very brief PowerPoint presentations that I want to run through real quick. And really what I'm going to be covering today is the product positioning. So that's going to be the first piece we're going to go through here, and I'm going to tell you, sort of what we're thinking when we built the product, sort of where we see it fitting in the marketplace, how we see it fitting in terms of a spectrum of availability, which is something I want to talk a little bit about, and then move on to pricing and packaging. So we put together some very specific packaging, for this product, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about some of the competitive pieces here. So for some of you, selling this in conjunction with an everRun MX license will be the way it goes. For others, you may be looking to position this as a form of proactive availability, say to some non-MX customers. And in that case, you may bump into some other monitoring tools out there. And I want to arm you with some of the positioning that we've put together in terms of where everRun Monitor fits in this space. And then we'll round it out with an actual demo of the product. And there's a couple of things on the demo. I want to keep it fairly high level. If we want to go into a more technical deep dive, certainly feel free to contact me and I'll do that. But for the purposes of today, I wanted to give you a nice overview, a look and feel of the product, and a sense for what are some of the key features of the product when you're talking to customers that'll help you sell. With that said, let me sort of jump right in here and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. To start off, and I've started all of these presentations when I talk about Monitor and where it fits into our portfolio. I talk about sort of what it is that we do today, because it's important to sort of set the stage and understanding sort of how Marathon products operate today. And obviously, everRun MX, being our flagship product, really operates above the platform. So we're essentially taking a Windows instance and all the applications that are inside of it and wrapping it up in our own little bundle and insulating that and obfuscating that from the actual I/O that's going on and where it's actually running. And we're also running these two sort of isolated bundles in lockstep. So ultimately, what we're doing is making sure that any failure that happens underneath our platform is completely transparent to that Windows instance and any applications running inside of it. So from that perspective, we give the customer a transparent ability to manage overall availability. So they don't have to worry about a failover scenario or what's going to happen if a NIC card fails or a RAID controller dies or a power supply goes on one of my servers. They don't have to worry about it because the Windows instance just continues to work. Now, we do bundle some monitoring capabilities with our product today, And if you think about it, or any of you that are familiar with our availability console, you know that we are very focused on the protected virtual machine. So we are giving you the health and status of that container as it relates to the underlying hardware. So what's happening with the physical network connections? What's happening with the disk? What's happening with the compute instance? What's happening at the server level? Is the server running okay? Are both compute instances running the way they're supposed to? So we're really doing a really good job of making sure that you know what's going on with that protected virtual machine, because we've got a laser focus on that right now. And that was the original scope of our product. And we're doing things, we've started to get into this proactive notification by introducing SNMP trap notifications with everRun MX. But ultimately what we're doing is reporting on PVM states, letting you know what the situation is with that protected virtual machine. And really what we're not doing, and sort of where we've sort of left off, and by design left off, is we've left off with the server and physical devices, so we don't give you a lot of insight there. The hypervisor, what's happening with it within DOM0, what's happening with the various elements of Zen. The operating system itself. So we're not inside of the protected virtual machine. We can tell you that the networking is working fine, the disks are there and working fine, but we don't know if the application services are running. What's going on in terms of CPU and memory consumption, what's going on with things like average disk queue length, those other performance metrics that may be important to an application. And then ultimately, we don't have any visibility right now into the application itself. And so, one of the things that we sat down and decided to build something like this was the ability to go ahead and actually get visibility to the application, get visibility to the OS, really sort of live inside of the PVM, but also, as you're going to see throughout the presentation, to actually take the proactive availability to something outside of the MX ecosystem. So we want to be able to monitor downstream switches. We want to be able to monitor, all of the edge devices that are connected to the server running on top of everRun MX. So we want to really provide that end-to-end management and reach out and say, okay, I'm not only going to be able to make sure that your core stays available, but I'm going to be able to monitor and tell you when something out at the edge has failed. And so you can go ahead and take action around that as well. And again, just to recap, what we were just talking about, again, the EAC, if you think about it, it's really there to process state changes. So if a component failure or a server failure happens, you're going to get a visual alert through the user interface. It really allows for everRun specific actions. So things like evacuating a host, taking a snapshot, protecting or unprotecting. That's what that management console exists for. And then obviously the pieces of proactive alerting that we're doing, really pushing state changes out via SNMP. And one of the challenges that we found as we went out and talked to customers was it was amazing how few were actually taking advantage of this, just basically because they've set up MX in a form of isolation where they don't have an SNMP server to trap these messages. And one of the things that you'll see as we go through the demo, everRun Monitor can act as an SNMP trap receiver and a sender. So, in the event that you want to capture SNMP traps, we allow you to build a bunch of logic behind those traps to say when that trap comes in, do this, whether it be alert somebody or take some other remediation type of action. We can also take those alerts and pass SNMP traps up to, say, an enterprise framework. But that was one of the reasons why we spent a lot of time doing that, because we were amazed at how few people were actually using that feature of our product. And really, we wanted to go beyond the state change. And that's really something that when we first designed MX and the user interface, we wanted to be able to quickly and easily report those state changes. But this product takes us beyond that. Now, some of the things that we thought about as we walked through and talked a little bit about what this product needed to be, we thought about the availability challenges that extend beyond that protected virtual machine. And it's great that we've got and we're really we feel like we're proponents of that level of availability, that sort of zero downtime, zero data loss server environment. However, availability and the challenges that surround availability go far beyond that. They are things like host instability. So it's not just a hardware failure, but if your log files fill up or you run out of disk space, you need some insight into that. Loss of performance. The ability to go ahead and be able to tell when a server or an application is not performing the way it's supposed to. Low memory, insufficient application storage, network throughput issues, loss of application services. These are all things that will potentially impact the availability of your services or your applications, and something that's just not captured in the current implementation of everRun MX. And then obviously, if you think about ways you or your customers may go about looking to fix these issues, they may look at logs, and these things are scattered all over the place. They may look at taking those logs and trying to correlate various events. And again, that can be difficult. I mean, it's something as simple as one log's reporting in Eastern Standard Time, one log's reporting in Greenwich Mean Time. You have these things bumped up against one another, and it's hard to parse these. And there are a bunch of point products out there that will help you do that. But generally speaking, you need a set of skills that are going to help you interpret this type of diagnostic data. And one of the things that you'll see in this product is really our drive to make this simpler, our drive to round out the availability story by giving you the insight that you need to sort of stand out in front of those potential problems that could sneak up on you. And then when something happens, be able to quickly diagnose what it is that's gone wrong without having to go on a quote unquote Easter egg hunt looking for the telltale signs after the fact. Now, in terms of, sort of customers and end users and sort of how they view this, we took a look at this and we really found sort of three personas here. You've got the folks that simply react to problems. So they don't really do anything. They wait for an issue to occur and they attempt to respond to it. And 9 out of 10 times they end up regretting that decision, because there's nothing worse than, as an IT administrator or as somebody that is responsible for a security system or an access control system, to start getting calls from end users that there's a problem, and you're finding out about it for the first time from that end user, because now you're under the gun. The clock has started to tick. You've got the users out there, the end users out there, that are going to use the homegrown or platform-based solutions. And I mentioned this earlier. These are the folks that are using a lot of the utility-grade sort of tools, the Wiresharks, the log interrogators, those types of things that are great in their own right. But unfortunately, in order to put together a complete solution, you're stuck with having to cobble together a handful of these tools. And it can be very cumbersome. And God forbid the person responsible for it leaves the organization. You're then left with trying to figure out, or having someone try and figure out or piece together what they were doing and how they were doing it. And then you've got the folks that are using the enterprise level frameworks. These are the customers that have already accepted the value in monitoring their environment and have gone out and made a large investment in, a CA or an HP OpenView, something along those lines. And these tools obviously are large and complex. They require significant training and skills. But the reality here is if the customer's already made that investment, if they've already spent a 6 or 7 figures on implementing something like that, we're not here to tell you that you need to go out and convince them to replace it with what we have. However, this product has been designed to operate inside of a framework like that. As I mentioned earlier, it's something that you can take these alerts and, as part of the processing, pass them up to a framework. And if you're running MX, rather than go and try and figure out all of the key metrics that you should be looking at in an MX environment, the purchase of something like everRun Monitor that comes pre-packaged with all this stuff really allows a plug-in interface for your enterprise framework right to your MX environment, using everRun Monitor as the intermediary there, and making it very, very simple. And then, we asked ourselves, what's required to achieve comprehensive availability management? And I think that, one of the things that we're looking at here is, what is the end-to-end management of availability, and how do we accomplish that? And again, I think that those of you that know our product line, know that we do, one aspect of this, and we do it very, very well, better than anyone in the business. However, we're looking at ways that we can expand that to allow customers to do a couple of different things. To either use it in conjunction with some of our core technology, or for those customers that aren't a fit for our core technology or have some resistance to our core technology, offer them some level of availability management through a monitoring tool. And to address that full spectrum, you really need to be looking at the application, the operating system, the hypervisor, the server itself, and then any edge devices that may be involved here. Things like IP-based door panels or security cameras, client-side devices that may be accessing a database. You also need to simplify, automate, and integrate all of this stuff. So things like fault management and fault recovery, well, we're providing that via MX. Monitoring and reporting, which is the gap that we're looking to fill here with everRun Monitor. And then you need to be able to proactively identify things like performance bottlenecks or throughput issues and be predictive about those impending causes of failure. And when we talk about impending causes of failure, oftentimes you'll hear me as we go through this sort of blitz around everRun Monitor talk about what I've called the snowball effect. And if a customer is running an everRun MX system and it's humming along and everything is running well, under the covers, they may have had a disk fail. They may have had a network adapter fail. They may have had a switch fail. They may have had fans fail or power supplies fail. And it's not one or two or three of those failures that's eventually going to take them down, because we're able to ride through most of that. But it's the sixth, seventh, or eighth failure that could potentially cause a problem for these customers. And so they want to understand what those impending causes of failure are and be able to enact repair scenarios, which, because they're running MX, those repair scenarios, those hardware-based repair scenarios, will not bring their application down. But we want to make sure that they continue to maintain full system redundancy. Now, in terms of proactive availability management, and this is a term that you're going to hear us use a lot when we talk about this, we're really talking about the full spectrum and being able to measure, monitor, correlate, and react to issues that are happening in an environment. So anything from the physical resources and the hypervisor, looking at system logs, looking at the operating system resources that are being utilized, application services, looking at everRun MX. And this is really, for the MX customer, there is a lot of value in just understanding that out of the box, this product will be configured to monitor an MX environment. We've spent the time and the engineering effort to make sure that we've got the hooks in there already. And as part of the demo, you'll see just how vast the alerting engine is and how customizable the alerting engine is to adapt itself to custom application services. So this isn't just, if it's not off the shelf, it's not monitored. We're able to customize this tool to be able to monitor just about anything. And then the performance pieces of this. So, things like how much CPU, disk, network am I running? What's the, A-Link traffic look like? What am I looking at in terms of average disk queue length or network latency? These are all important pieces that we want to make sure we're monitoring, and we want to make sure that we're giving customers the ability to go ahead and look at those things. And then ultimately, the edge devices. Based on the nature of our business, we tend to do a lot of it with customers that are using large numbers of cameras, door panels, tags, those types of things, where we want to be able to, if it's got an IP address or if it's on an IP network, we can monitor its availability. And, for some of our partners and some of our customers, their software already does that. And we simply want to look to go ahead and integrate and plug in rather than replace. So we want to make sure that we're able to do that as well. And really, when we talk about the value here of Monitor, we're talking about, again, bringing that proactive nature to availability management, being able to do things like monitoring databases, monitoring SQL Server as an example. One of the examples I've got set up in my demo here, I'm actually going to show you how not only can you deploy an agent inside of a PVM and look at SQL Server services and make sure they're running, look at the SQL Server processes and see what type of resources they're consuming, but also set up Monitor so that it is actually logging into the database from outside of the server. So we're going to go ahead and look at the network latency of that login. How long does it take? Am I able to continue to have clients log in? And if I can't, what remediation do I need to take? So all of these things it's a completely configurable tool. However, for customers that are just interested in, let's say, the everRun MX portion of this, out of the box, it will go ahead and monitor all that. So you don't have to worry about designing all of your rules on your own. We pre-configured and ship with just about everything we think you'll need. And then we're going to work with our partners and our independent software vendors on a one-on-one basis to actually set up pre-configured rules for their applications as well, making this widely adoptable to just about anybody. Now, MX monitoring and its expanded capabilities, again, I think, guys, what we're doing here is we're doing two things. We're not just looking at the container that has the virtual machine running inside of it, the applications running inside of it, making sure it's healthy. But we're now inside of the virtual machine, watching what's happening there, and we're outside of the MX platform, capable of watching what's happening out there as well. We're also putting some hooks into the hypervisor itself and making sure that the customer is able to monitor that as well. So again, all very, very things that sort of enhance what we're currently doing with our EAC. And over time, you'll see the two UIs sort of meld together, and we're ultimately going to get there in terms of making sure that we've got sort of a single pane of glass. I mentioned out-of-the-box monitoring for MX, and again, this is an important piece because really for the MX customer, there's no overhead here outside of simply installing this thing. It's already been configured to make sure we're capturing all the elements. With very little setup, we're going to go ahead and make sure we capture and trap all of the pieces that are involved in tracking what you see in the EAC. Making sure you can see what's happening inside of DOM0, what's happening with the hypervisor. All of those elements that make up an MX installation will be monitored right out of the box. So the customer has to do very little in order to get there. And that's something, again, guys, as we talk competitive later on, if your customer is sold on MX, this is a monitoring tool that's already designed to monitor MX and is going to be set up to monitor MX. So you can position this as, sort of an add-on or an intermediary to any other monitoring tool they might be using. And then it's interesting, I want to talk a little bit about what else is monitored. And this was a decision that we made in terms of, what else were we going to support in terms of monitoring. And, really we're supporting monitoring of, baseboard devices. So if you've got, from your hardware vendor, a baseboard agent that you've installed. So you got fans, temp sensors, voltage, all of those things can be monitored and grabbed from those servers. Network devices. So I'll show you guys examples of switches, a managed virtual switch or managed switch where you want to do things like port bandwidth monitoring and latency monitoring to be able to see what the status is, and then overall availability monitoring of a switch on a port by port basis. Data center components. So the bottom line here is if it has an IP address, we can monitor it. So, heating and cooling, never uninterruptible power supplies, printers, physical storage devices, edge devices, and then obviously applications and databases. Now, I've talked a lot about monitoring everRun MX. The other nice part about this, guys, is that we are able to, and as you'll see during the demo, able to monitor both Xen and VMware and soon to come Hyper-V. But basically what we're talking about here is the ability to monitor any piece of a customer's infrastructure. So from a positioning perspective, if the customer is running MX, great, we can position this there. If the customer chooses not to run MX and we still have something here that we can offer that customer in terms of proactive availability management and the ability to go ahead and monitor all of their VMware infrastructure as well. So that's also part of the product. So with that said, guys, I want to talk in the next piece here of the positioning overview that I'm going to do is talking a little bit about a demo and sort of what a demo might look like. Now, I'll preface this by saying that there is a 30-day trial that's available out on the website. We've actually made this download and go. So as customers are driven to this, they can grab a copy of the software. They can go ahead and start actually using it right away. So there's no request process. We do have a form that they'll fill out. They'll need to give us a valid email address, and we'll email them the link. They can download the software and documentation and just roll with it. So we're gonna do that, and as part of that, when we talk about what is going to be a sort of an effective demo or what we might want to drive them toward doing, I found it effective to talk to them about the various components that we're able to monitor. So servers, networks, hypervisor, operating system, and all of these items. And we'll see that as part of the demo that I'm going to do. And then, reporting classes and use cases, talk about things like hardware fault detection, resource contention conditions, performance bottlenecks, and trending and baselining. That's another key piece of the product that you'll see when we get to the demo portion. And then ultimately, things like, the everRun MX aspects of the monitoring tools. So talking to them about the health and well-being of DOM0, the health and well-being of the MX host itself, baseboard monitoring and alerting. I think that, a lot of the baseboard monitoring and alerting sort of suffers from some of the same problems that you have with our implementation of SNMP, and that if there isn't a server there to catch those things and process those alerts and actually do something with them, somebody might not see them. Things like hardware fault detection and the importance of being able to, especially in an MX environment, as I talked about earlier, that snowball effect, that ability to understand that I've had a failed disk on my RAID set. I need to know that, because if I have one, two, or three more, I could be at risk of losing my redundancy, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay out in front of that. So looking at those types of things and being able to receive traps from both a hardware-based monitor like a lights-out card, like an iDRAC, or being able to receive those traps from, say, an open managed type of software package that gets installed on the hypervisor itself and is actually able to monitor the hardware. The resource contention stuff, and again, guys, as we're going to see during my demo, understanding resource contention within the platform itself and looking at it from the top level, which is the actual physical host itself, looking at DOM0 and its resources and the resources that it has available, and then looking at the VM and looking at the protected VM rather, and looking at the resources it has available. As you're thinking about growth, or as you're looking for, sort of where's the problem, where am I running into an issue, it's important to be able to quickly access this information, be able to trend it. So I want to be able to go back and look for the last 3 weeks, what type of CPU utilization has been happening on the platform, what type of CPU and memory utilization has been happening, and where do I get convergence here? Do I have a problem where I'm running low on both of these resources? So when we talk about those core resources and being able to trend and baseline and understand where resource contention is happening is another nice aspect of the tool. And then one of the things I'll show you during my demo is the performance bottleneck replay. So looking at things like setting up graphs and dashboards to be able to do things like in real time monitor performance counters, to be able to grab things like syslog entries and be able to understand what's happening on the platform from a performance perspective, all make it very, very easy. And I talked about trending and baselining. And again, I think that this is something where when we talk to end users about this, we're talking about being able to understand as a platform runs, what is normal, right? So what is normal supposed to look like? Out of the box, you might see, 75% CPU utilization, and then it may settle down, and that may happen, through periods of the day. If you can trend that and are comfortable with where those trend lines are, and then ultimately set alerts around exceeding those trend lines or exceeding those thresholds for periods of time, you now have a valuable piece of insight into what's happening on the platform and when potentially a problem could take place. So with that said, guys, what I want to do is I want to transition a little bit now into the pricing and packaging. And, this has been one of those situations where we've put this together and attempted to do some packaging of the product itself so that we make this easy to sell. I think one of the driving factors here for us was, how do we make this simple so that when a customer chooses MX and they decide they want monitoring, they're not looking at a large pick list of elements and are unsure which ones to choose. So we've attempted to create a series of packages that the MX customer may be interested in if they decide to do monitoring. And you may have to augment these with items from a pick list, but certainly if they buy a base package, they'll certainly get, if not everything, if they don't get everything, they'll get 90% of what they need. In most cases, they'll get everything that they need to get started in terms of monitoring. So the first package we put together was an MX local configuration, and as you can see there, at a $3,200 price point, where we're essentially giving the customer agentless monitoring components. So we're basically able to agentlessly monitor the Zen server hosts. So essentially, in the product, you're telling it what's the IP address of the pool master, and it will go out and tap into the Zen APIs to gather metrics about the server and agentlessly monitor one managed switch. And then we're providing them with agent-based monitoring components, 2 components for DOM0 that will get deployed inside of DOM0, and 3 protected virtual machine agents. So that will give them the insight into what's happening inside of the protected virtual machine. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the competitive and the demo, the level of deep metrics that a customer is going to get when they deploy these agents. And the agents can be deployed right from a central console, so it's not like you have to walk through each machine and deploy an agent. But we want to make sure that the customer gets the level of deep metrics inside of those protected virtual machines. And so if a customer is buying MX in a local configuration, they could certainly buy this, and they'll get most of, if not everything that they need in order to get started straight away. Now, as you'll see at the end, we're also going to have an a la carte menu that they could build a custom solution on. But for the purposes of saying I want MX and I want monitoring, these are the 2 SKUs that you could order. Then we've got an everRun MX split site configuration. And again, guys, this is really where we start getting into adding things to the package without having and being able to do single SKU ordering without having to go through and pick a bunch of items from a pick list. And again, as you can see here, we're getting the agentless monitoring with the 2 Zen server hosts. We're adding a second managed switch here, so now we're getting multiple managed switches. We're giving them the 2 DOM0 agents, 1 for each Zen host, the 3 protected virtual machine agents, and we're also giving them 2 agents to monitor the quorum services. So if they, wherever they decide to deploy quorum, they could put an everRun monitor agent on that box. They could point it at the quorum services and make sure that those quorum services are running as well, and be alerted to the fact that if there's a problem, or more importantly, if that quorum machine goes down or something happens to that machine that's running quorum, they'll know about it via the everRun monitor tool. And so again, if the customer says they want everRun MX with split site and they want monitoring, we've again attempted to make something that's very simple for a single SKU ordering process. And then we've got the same thing for everRun Monitor for Extend configurations. And again, guys, if you think about Extend and what it does, we're talking about now asynchronously replicating over to a second instance or a second Windows instance from a protected virtual machine. And again, we're going to give you 3 Zen server hosts, assuming that you want to put Zen server over on the DR side, 2 managed switches, 2 agents for DOM0, and then 3 agents for your protected virtual machines. And again, what we're talking about here is the ability to go ahead and monitor all of those elements of an Extend environment. And if the customer wants to order Extend, and again, they can simply order the Extend package from monitoring their Extend implementation, making it very simple for the customer to make that decision. And then obviously we offer some component ordering. And for those of you that have had an opportunity to take a look at the price book that we sent out back on July 31st, you'll notice that we've got a complete a la carte menu where you can, order the various components. And there are some add-ons to this. So for the more security conscious customers, there's an add-on for Windows log on, log off, and to be able to monitor and log that at a centralized server. We're able to go ahead and add or augment any of the packages. If the customer wants to monitor their VMware environment, they can actually create an a la carte solution from the VMware pick list on the component ordering. So again, making it very easy to go ahead and actually either augment an existing package, or if the customer so chooses, to sort of build a custom package for themselves so that they can go ahead and monitor exactly what it is that they want to, without having to be forced into a specific package. So we wanted to maintain a level of flexibility while also making it easy for the customers. And we'll save the questions there for the end. But that's the pricing and packaging piece of this, guys. And I'm also going to make these slides available to everybody via the partner portal as well. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is the competitive piece of this. And, I feel like it's important, if for no other reason than just to sort of help you understand, where we feel like we're fitting in here in terms of the other solutions that are in the market. And so let me just bring that PowerPoint up. And go ahead and get to the beginning here. Keep getting the technology overview. Okay, let's make sure that, yeah, there we go. So one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we armed you guys with some information about the competitors that are out there. And obviously, some of this was geared toward our own internal sales organization. So you'll have to bear with me. But, when you look at the competitive dialogue and sort of why is Monitor, when it comes to selling Monitor, why is it different than, say, everRun MX? Let's face it, guys, monitoring is relatively a commodity business. I mean, you think about what's out there, and what the customer is up against when they're looking at monitoring solutions. There's an awful lot that's out there, and I think that when you think about what Monitor is attempting to accomplish, and just bear with me for a sec, guys. I want to make sure we're in the right order here. Yep. Okay. When we think about what's out there and we think about what the goals are of the everRun monitoring tool, we're really focused on gaps, right? There are a lot of gaps out there, starting with the gap around, there are already monitoring tools out there that are custom designed to monitor the everRun MX platform, which we're delivering. And then, if you think about the tools that are out there and sort of what they do, and I touched on this a little earlier, you've got your freeware or your SMB type point products that are easy to use, very element specific though. So they're very, I'm going to monitor network ports, or I'm going to monitor network traffic, or I'm going to parse logs, or I'm going to do. So there's a lot of those tools that are out there. There are a lot of legacy vendors, high cost legacy vendors out there, large enterprise frameworks that are out there. And then you've got, sort of your in between, products that either focus exclusively on the actual virtual machine or they focus on the hypervisor. We're trying to bring all that together to really sort of close a lot of those gaps with everRun Monitor and really make sure that we provide a comprehensive availability management solution. Because really, that's the whole point of monitoring, right? So the whole point of monitoring is that you want to be able to, when something goes wrong, and usually when things go wrong, things become unavailable. You want to make sure that you're able to take action and you know about it as quickly as possible. So that's really why we're positioning this as that sort of proactive availability tool. The competitive strategy here, guys, and I think, again, this slide was a little geared toward our internal sales organization, but I left it in here because I thought it added some value. It's really essential to uncover pain. I think that when I'm out there talking to prospects, and we've done a lot of that here internally, I'm asking customers, outside of MX, if you have a monitoring solution, it clearly isn't set up for MX, but outside of that, what are some of the things that it doesn't do? And if the customer can give me a list of 3 things that it doesn't do, and I can show them how to accomplish 2 of those, I'm in a very, very strong position from a selling perspective and really helping them understand the value that we're able to bring. And again, guys, this is a very crowded market. I mean, there's no question about it, right? This is a market that there's a lot of tools that are out there that do some elements of what everRun Monitor does. There are a lot, and I think that's one of the first things that I got when I pitched this to our sales organization was, boy, man, we are getting into an area where there's just a lot of competition. But I think that from the elements of sort of differentiating ourselves, we really have to focus on the MX aspects of this, and also the sort of multifaceted sort of elements that we're able to monitor. So everything from that device that's sitting all the way out at the edge of the network, that's a camera looking at the front door, all the way down to the CPU utilization of the server that's utilizing it, and the switches in between, and the hypervisor that's in between, and the actual physical hardware it's being hosted on. really sort of being as comprehensive as we can be. And I to that point, I talked a little bit earlier about sort of the differentiation between sort of everRun Monitor and some of the other tools that are out there. So if you look at things like Veeam Monitor or vKernel or vFoglight or any of those types of tools that are out there, they fall into a couple of different camps, and some of them will monitor just the hypervisor. So they're going to tell you that, all right, here's your hypervisor. Here are all the virtual machines running, and really what they're looking at is the virtual machine container and its memory utilization, its CPU utilization, its disk utilization, and is it actually running? Am I getting responses from that machine? So that's where a lot of these tools that sort of sit in the middle stop. And then you've got the green bar at the top there where unless you're actually in the virtual machine, you won't know. So I could have a database being unavailable and SQL server's hung. There's an event log that's reporting the error, but because I'm just looking at the hypervisor and the hypervisor sees the virtual machine and says, "Are you there?" and it says yes, I'm not seeing that. So I could be potentially reporting something as good when actually the application and the whole point of deploying that virtual machine has failed. And so that's really where Monitor is going to go. It's going to get inside that protected virtual machine or inside of that virtual machine and really give you some of that insight so that now you've got both of these levels of monitoring. You've got the hypervisor and MX level, and you've got the application, database, operating system, resource level monitoring as well. And when we look at the landscape out there, the competitive landscape, and sort of who's out there, this is something that we put together based on sort of our view of the marketplace. Again, you've got some of your lower cost, providers that are out there, that are, providing a tool that, it does what it does. It doesn't necessarily provide the level of scalability or functionality that's required. And then as you sort of move up and to the right, you start to climb in price and you start to see, sort of an enhancement of these, sort of scalability, functionality type pieces. And then obviously all the way up in the upper right-hand corner there, you've got all of your enterprise frameworks. And this is sort of where we feel like Monitor fits in. We feel like we're delivering functionality at a level that's just simply above what these listed competitors are able to offer. And of course, if you're talking about someone about this in the context of MX, a lot of these go away because they just don't have the intelligence built into the product to be able to do that. So, we're certainly looking at this from a situation of being able to provide a lot of functionality and scalability, but at a reasonable cost. And of course, why everRun Monitor wins. And I think this is a slide that, when we talk about what we're learning and sort of what we're seeing in the marketplace and what we think you'll see as you go out there and talk to customers about Monitor. Again, you've got those folks that are running the enterprise level frameworks, the CAs, HBs, CompuWare, BMC, IBM. You are not going to convince these folks to rip out $1 million solution to plug in everRun Monitor. However, the nice part about Monitor is it acts as a nice intermediary. So it can process and actually pull information from down below it and pass it to a system above it. And really make sure that if you're running an MX environment that you drop this in and you've got immediate visibility into all of those bits of MX. And more importantly, your $1 million enterprise framework has visibility into everRun MX now as well. You've got your virtual only solutions. This is where your vKernel, EG Innovations, VM Turbo, Veeam, and Quest vFoglight, all these solutions are excellent in their own right. And there'll be customers out there that they work for. And from an MX perspective, only EG Innovations is actually supporting Xen. So that's a problem straight away for some of these guys. But if you think about what these guys are doing, they fall into that classic case here of this right here, where they're looking at the hypervisor. They're just not inside the virtual machine. They don't have the ability to tell you what's happening in there. And then you look over at your network and physical monitoring, you start getting into your point products, your SolarWinds, Spiceworks, Nagos, What's Up Gold. All of these products do a small thing, and they do it very well, and they tend to be less expensive. But now we start getting into a situation where you need multiples of these products in order to create a complete solution. And that sort of roll your own approach can certainly be difficult when it comes to piecing together things like pricing and support contracts, and whose neck do you wring when the thing doesn't work right, and who do you call if you have a problem. You've got to sort of piece all that together if you're using sort of that cobbled together sort of roll your own solution. So, when you look at this, and I think that the appropriate title of this slide is not so much why we win against an enterprise solution, because I don't think that we're going to be coming up against these guys too often in a situation where it's going to be a replacement. However, some customers may choose to, sort of expand their monitoring because we can act as an intermediary inside of that framework. They may choose to deploy our agents out to those client side devices or those edge devices simply because we're less expensive. So if they've got 5,000 edge devices to monitor, and the enterprise framework company is going to charge them between $300 to $500 or $500 to $600 to monitor those, and they can get it from us cheaper, and we simply plug into that framework, there's a potential opportunity there. There's also an opportunity when we talk about MX and just being able to allow everRun Monitor to be the sub tool, if you will, the subcontractor, if you will, from a monitoring perspective, to monitor the MX platform and simply pass that information up. The virtual server monitoring, this goes back to that slide that I flipped back to a few minutes ago, where you've got a situation where these things will report health of the virtual machine. Is it turned on? Is it requesting a large amount of CPU from the hypervisor? Is it is it running? Is there a problem? Did it fail over? However, it doesn't have any visibility inside of that virtual machine, so there's no application level pieces of this. There's no basically looking at sort of those resource contention bottlenecks or problems that can occur. And then there's nothing going on outside of that virtual platform. So there's no monitoring of the switches based on this. For that, you'd have to buy something like this and then go over to one of those utility grade or network monitoring products to be able to grab that stuff. So again, we're talking about having to build a multi-vendor solution to get something that's that comprehensive. And then, some of these competitive metrics, these are a bit of an eye chart. And so we're going to make sure we get these over to you in the form of these PowerPoints. But, of course, if you look here, we've taken a crack at analyzing what are some of the elements of these various products, and, what are some of the things that they do and don't do versus what everRun Monitor is able to do. And as you can see here, it continues on to, another page as we sort of looked at, or we tried to take or cut as wide a swath as we could in terms of looking at all these things. And I think it's important. This is almost like a nice cheat sheet if you've got a customer that's asking you about this particular product and you want to go head to head with it. You can just sort of tick off a couple of items here and look at some of the things that it does and doesn't do. And then, some of this stuff, and I'm going to send this out to you guys, so it's not so important to go over this here, but we actually took a look at some of the pricing of some of these things. So I'll give you an example here, the pricing and packaging from, say, a Veeam monitor. Now, this is less relevant in an MX environment because Veeam monitor doesn't do Zen. But if you're running into these guys outside of that and you look at, sort of the normalized cost, they charge on a per socket basis. They're, for their monitoring product, it's $250 per socket. So if you're monitoring a single, two-host machine or two-socket machine, you're looking at $500. If you want to add their reporting tool, which is misspelled there, you're going to be looking at another $750. Or if you want their bundle, you're looking at $1,100 per server and a normalized sort of two-socket approach. Whereas what you're going to get from us as you look down the price book, you'll quickly notice, because we're giving you the equivalent of that bundle, right? So we're going to do the monitoring and the reporting, and you're able, even if you don't deploy a single agent, we're still going to give you the monitoring and reporting, and we're still going to do it for a less expensive solution than you might get with something like Veeam. So with that said, guys, what I want to transition into now is actually the demo itself. And, what I want to do is walk you through some of the high level aspects of the product just to give you a sense for what it looks like, how it works. One of the things that I want to cover before I go into this, and I apologize for not having a picture, but I'll certainly get one out to you, is what the architecture looks like. So, from an architectural standpoint, there is a monitor server. Now, that monitoring server can run on something as small as a desktop machine. It's basically going to come in an installable package. It will install on both 32-bit and 64-bit Windows OSs. Anything from Windows XP all the way up to 2008 R2 and everything in between. And it basically uses SQL Server as a backend database. That SQL Server can either be an existing SQL Server in a customer's environment, or if they don't have one, or if this is being installed in an isolated area, they certainly can choose to lay down the embedded SQL Express. And obviously you want to be cognizant of how large an environment they want to monitor when you want to use Express. But Express is certainly there. It will install as part of the product if you so choose, and allow you to go ahead and capture all the metrics and data there. Now, once you've got this deployed, and I'm starting off here, guys, and I'm going to work backwards a little bit. We're going to start off with looking at the dashboard, and then I'm going to work my way backwards to configuration, and then we'll get into the actual nuts and bolts of monitoring. What I want you to see here, and what I want to talk you through, is the various elements that I'm monitoring inside of my environment. And up here, I start off with what's being labeled as virtual hosts. Now, I'm monitoring a 2-host everRun MX pool. These are the 2 physical hosts that make up that pool, Fred and George. And any of you that's seen me do a demo before know I've got my 2 hosts, Fred and George. Those are Bob's lab machines. And as you can see here, I've got, for each monitored element, I've got a couple of icons. This is letting me know that it's a host. This is letting me know that it's running Zen. So it's identified this. Now, the other piece here to remember is you're going to see down here, as I look down here, this indicates there is an agent currently connected. If you don't see this icon, it means I'm monitoring this agentlessly. So I've got Zen host that I've identified here. This is telling me the current outstanding alert notification. So there is an outstanding alert here that I need to be aware of. And this is a drill down, a quick drill down into a server metrics dashboard. So if I click on here, I'm able to go ahead and quickly bring up the server metrics that are associated with this particular MX host. And this is looking at it from the host perspective. So how much CPU do I have available on this box? How much memory is available on this box? How much SR space do I have on this box? And then I can come all the way down here to things like the networking. I want to look at each individual network adapter. But the nice part about this is I can also trend, and I can look at 12 hours. I can look at the past 3 days, all the way out to the last 3 months, and really get a sense for what's happening with this machine. Again, at a glance, at a very, very quick glance. So that's monitoring agentlessly the actual Zen host, and I've got George over here as well, and he's green, so he doesn't have any outstanding alerts. The next thing we're moving down into is the scan that the everRun Monitor tool does, looking for virtual machines. Now, in this case, with everRun MX, this section here is going to be very unique in that we are actually not presenting the protected virtual machine. We are presenting the availability managers. We are actually deploying agents to the protected virtual machines, and we are actually presenting here the availability managers that have been identified. So in an MX platform, we're scanning and we're seeing these availability managers running. And again, for those that are familiar with the MX platform and understanding resources being consumed by the availability manager, this has potentially got some value as well. So we are monitoring that and able to pick those up. Now, if you were in a non-MX environment, what you'd be looking at there is just any of the virtual machines that are running. And again, you'd get surface level metrics that are provided by the hypervisor for those virtual machines. As I move further down the stack here, I'm starting to get into storage. So now I'm looking at the storage that's associated with these machines. And again, I'm picking all this up agentlessly. And I can interrogate things like local storage on one of these hosts. And I can get a quick at-a-glance look at the SR utilization, the trending around that, and I can look at the various elements that are consuming storage on that box. I can look at things like what is the storage being used for, virtual device usage. Do I have any orphaned virtual disks? Do I have uncoalesced space that I need to reclaim? Do I have anything that's being used by snapshots? So all this is some insight into how storage is being utilized. And again, I'm getting all this without having deployed a single agent. Now I move down into my servers, my agent-based physical and virtual servers. Now in an MX environment, this is really where we're going to deploy an agent to the TOS. So we're going to deploy an agent to the actual presented virtual machine. And I've got a handful of them here. I've got combined demo. I've got DR master and DR replica. I'm also going ahead and deploying an agent to the control domain. So if I want to get some insight into what's happening on DOM0, I can simply click on it and I can go ahead and gather those metrics and look at what is the CPU utilization of DOM0, what is the memory utilization of DOM0, how much storage space does DOM0 have available to it. And then I can also look at availability. So I can look at, is DOM0 responding to network pings? Is it responding? Is the agent that's inside of it responding? If I start to get an unstable control domain on one of these hypervisors, this is something that the MX aspect of everRun Monitor has been designed to look for. So, and I can do this inside of each one of these virtual machines. I can come over here and look at combined demo and look at what I have assigned to it for resources and is it available. Now in combined demo, I'm looking at availability from 3 measures. I'm looking at availability in that I'm polling the agent to see if it's still running. I'm actually pinging the production NIC on this protected virtual machine to see if it's responding and what its latency looks like. And then I'm also doing a SQL connect. What I'm doing here is I'm running SQL Server inside of this machine. And so my agent is handling making sure that the services are running and that the processes are running for SQL Server. But this is actually acting as a client and logging into the database. And I'll show you in just a moment where I set these credentials up. But my monitor server is going out and saying, hey, can I still log into this database? Can I make an active connection to this database? And if I can't, boy, I better tell somebody. And so this is sort of that outside looking in style monitoring that we've added with everRun Monitor. Now, as I continue to go down here, I'm also monitoring a couple of what I call edge devices. And so we're looking at things like a managed switch. So if I'm interested in my switches, I simply go ahead and provide the IP address of my managed switch. What I'm going to do with this switch is I'm going to be able to monitor this switch on a port by port basis. And so what it's going to do is it's going to go out and gather up all the port information. Not only is it going to make sure the switch is still available, so it's going to make sure the switch is still responding, but it's measuring the operational state of the switch on a port by port basis. It's allowing me to measure all of the traffic here, and I can go ahead and set thresholds around this. So, if this switch has an uplink coming at it from, a series of switches downstream, I may be concerned with things like port saturation. So I want to make sure I'm looking at this switch and looking at this port and identifying where a potential bottleneck might be. So I'm able to go ahead and actually label these ports and monitor these ports. And something as simple as their operational status. Is it still operational? Did someone walk up and pull the plug out? If that happens, I want to know about it, and I'm going to go ahead and get an alert on that. So, and then I come down here to things like my lights out cards. And so, there's 2 ways to monitor these things. And so one of the things that I talk to customers about all the time is if you're going to put servers in remote locations, these, either ILO or iDRAC cards become your best friend, because you do not want to get in a car on a Saturday and drive 300 miles out to a data center only to be able to push a power button on a host. So you want to make sure that these things remain available. And so what I'm doing here is I'm actually interrogating the iDRAC card by not only pinging its IP address, but I'm setting up everRun Monitor to periodically, in this case I believe it's every 15 minutes, actually log into the DRAC card, log into the web interface of the DRAC card, and make sure that it's still responding to web requests as well. And then I've also got a printer. I mean, it's something as simple as a printer that I've set up on the network. and I want to monitor that, and I want to know if there's a problem with that or if I'm throwing off alerts on the printer as well. So, guys, I wanted to give you sort of the scope of what I'm monitoring as part of this demo. With that said, let me take a step back here and show you a little bit about sort of the setup and configuration of this thing. And it's we've tried to make it as simple as possible. When you look at things like when you want to monitor based on the hypervisor, you can simply start here by clicking on this. You tell it what hypervisor. In an MX environment, you're going to pick Citrix Zen, and you'll launch the wizard. And what's going to happen here is you're going to tell it the IP address of the pool master, and it will go out and it will find the hosts that are in that pool. It will grab all of that agentless information that I was talking to you about earlier, and it will start monitoring that. So even if the customer decides that they don't want to monitor inside of the PVM, they can get just this piece, and it's very, very simple to set up, and they can gather those metrics. If I want to go ahead and deploy agents, again, this is very, very simple. I can go out here and I can go ahead and install agents and simply come out and say I want to look for servers and workstations, and I want to discover based on the virtual machines on the connected hosts. So that inventory of VMs that I got from my hypervisor, I can do that. I can discover systems based on domains or work groups, or I can find systems by IP address. So I can plug in IP address and subnet and basically search based on that. What the tool will do is go out and do a network discovery of these things and give you the option of actually pushing the agent out to these things. So you can pick and choose where you want to push it, but push the agent out so you don't have to, go out and worry about, having an IT person go out and push these things out through some custom script. It will actually do it here for you. And then as we get into sort of talking about some of the other items that we want to monitor, applications and databases, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Networks, I'll also show you an example of that, but that's as simple as adding the IP address of a network switch, and ultimately telling that network switch you want it to send SNMP trap messages up to us. So it's very, very simple there. All of these things are very wizard driven in terms of deploying and being able to add an asset for monitoring to the actual everRun monitor. And then once you've done that, you've got a nice inventory here. So we looked at the dashboard earlier, but this is just a straight inventory of the things that I'm monitoring. And ultimately, it has everything listed in here. And then these pieces here that have the green boxes indicate that these are agent-based monitoring that I'm doing. Now, one of the things that I can do here is I can come in, and we're going to get to monitoring rules in just a second, but I can quickly take an asset and come in here and I can go ahead and choose what rules I want to assign to it. So what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to determine what rules is this thing eligible for. And I'm going to be able to go ahead and assign rules to it just by ticking off a group of boxes. If I want to come in here and basically do something like edit the asset. So when I say edit the asset, I can go ahead and change the display name. I can add it to or assign it to a group or give it a description. I can go ahead and it's going to tell me what domain or work group it's associated with. I can also designate it as a master agent, or I can designate it as a syslog server. So if I'm deploying this at a remote location, and I've got my main monitoring server at location A, and I've got a bunch of assets I want to monitor over at location B, rather than have all those assets point at the monitoring server over a network, I can deploy a single agent at that remote location, designate this the master agent. All those devices will report into this master agent, and just this master agent will report back to headquarters. When I look at properties, one of the things that I can do here is I can go ahead and drive how we want to determine asset availability. And so one of the things here is ping. This is something very simple. It's going to ping the device. It's going to look for a response, and if it doesn't get one, it's going to raise an alarm. HTTP is, again, another example of what I was doing with the DRAC card. So I can go ahead and say, here's a username and password, and this is the page I want to look for to make sure it renders properly. I can come out here and do things like SQL Connect. So in this case here, I've told it, here's the SQL Server instance name, here's the database name, here's the username and password. Act as a SQL client and continue to manage availability and make sure that that's available. So that's another piece of this that I can do right from here. Now, the other thing you can do here is you can assign or set up your own monitoring rules. Now, this is where we ship this product with a lot of monitoring rules that have already been established. And we did that for a reason. We don't want people to have to start from scratch. We've done that with MX. So as you can see here, we've got a whole group of MX monitoring rules that we've set up here that come pre-configured. But there's also a bunch of basic monitoring rules. But the important thing here is you can come in and you can create your new monitoring rule. And if you're a customer that wants to monitor something like event logs. So if I want to monitor my event logs, I can come in here and create a rule, and I simply tell it, what log do I want to look at? What type do I want to look for? Do I want to look for a specific event ID, a source? Do I want to include, exclude? And then how do I want to assign that rule once I've created it? So for event logs, pretty straightforward. If I want to monitor services, so if I want to monitor a set of custom services that I've installed, I can come out here and look at the services that I want to monitor. And notice I can pick services by individual machine, or I can look at all the services running in the environment and simply create a rule based on that, and it will go out and everywhere that service is running, it will apply that rule. A couple of the others that I want to mention as part of this, things like process watch. So if I want to scan a process and make sure that a process doesn't exceed a certain amount of CPU, or if I know there's a process that's out there that shouldn't be running, I want to make sure that it's not running. If I want to go ahead and do something like monitor the CPU and memory utilization of a process, I can do that here as well. Now, it's also important, and I want to take an opportunity here to introduce you to a couple of other elements of the monitoring rules. One is a schedule. So, all of these monitoring rules, can be suspended, if you will, for a period of time. So if you know something's going to happen during a maintenance window, or something's going to happen every night as part of a backup or as part of routine maintenance, you can tell this thing, look, I want you to suspend the rule between these times so you don't get inundated with notifications. In terms of notifications themselves, you have a lot of options here. One, you have an email address. So you can go ahead and tell it, here's where my email server is. Push an email up to that, and it will get delivered to whomever and alert that person that there's a problem. I can pass SNMP trap messages. And again, I mentioned this earlier where we are both a receiver and processor of SNMP traps and a distributor of SNMP traps. So we can go ahead and pass those up as well. Syslog. So if I've got an enterprise framework that's monitoring a syslog server and I want to create a syslog entry somewhere, I can do that as well. Or if I'm remote and I've got some sort of tap or modem type access, I can go ahead and send a notification out via that. We've also got documentation on how to configure this for things like SMS text messages. That's simply just a listing of all the email-based gateways for these things that comes with the product. And then, one of the powerful parts about this monitoring engine is the ability to enact remediation. Now, some customers just want to know when something happens. But if you see something happen over and over and over and over again, and you as an administrator take the same action over and over and over again, why not automate that process? And so, one of the things we allow you to do is identify scripts that if you see a certain condition, let's say there's a memory leak in a piece of software, and that the only way to reset memory that memory leak and reclaim that memory is to simply restart a service. You can go ahead and set a memory threshold and then tell it restart the service. You can run a script that will restart the service, and you can run that script either on the monitoring server, on the server that's being monitored, or any other server in your environment you can run that script on. Or you can simply restart the server itself. But really, you can do any of these things, and it really gives you the ability to automate remediation when you have something that is simply going to happen time and time and time and time again, and eliminate that problem. So those are items or options that are available to all monitoring rules. Some of the other monitoring rules I want to mention on the surface, things like File Watch. File Watch is a valuable tool, twofold. One, if you want to monitor logs and you want to monitor for a very specific search string, so a text string in a log file, What file watch can do is you simply point it at a directory. It will interrogate in real time all the files that are in that log, looking at those string, looking for that search string. So if I set up a file watch, I can simply come over here and say, here's the path I want it to look at. Here's the search string I want it to look for. But I also can monitor the changes made to a given directory. So for the more security conscious, or for the folks that want to monitor what's happening to specific files out on the network, you can monitor that for things like a change in size, date and time that it's changed, if it grows to a certain size, if it is erased or deleted, or if it's been copied. All of those things can be monitored from here. And again, you can schedule, you can notify, you can remediate as you see necessary. So I think you guys get the point. I mean, we've got a very robust set of monitoring rules that you're able to set up here. And as you can see, the ones that I've got set up in the background here are the ones that the product ships with. And there's already a fairly robust number of these things already, including all the pieces to monitor everRun MX. Now, this all goes to, great. I now want to go through and set up all my monitoring. Now, the monitoring actually has to begin. And I showed you guys the dashboard earlier where, I can look at the status of a given monitored asset. In this case, I look here and I see that I've got an SNMP trap message that was received from one of my hosts. And I look here and it looks like I had a patrol read that stopped. So it started and stopped, and I cleared the started one already. If I click acknowledge, I can go ahead and acknowledge that alert, and it will clear it and return myself to a green status. I look at things like combined demo. Here's where we're getting some of the information around, an Ethernet adapter that went from good to degraded. So I've got an Ethernet adapter that was shut off on this, and then I get another message when it's been changed or transitioned back to a good state. So again, at a glance, I can see what's going on with these servers. And again, this is an example of a file watch where I'm looking at a log on DOM0. I'm looking at the storage logs on DOM0 to look for any error messages in the storage logs of DOM0. So I gave it a search string, and it's looking for an error code or an error message there. So I can go ahead and interrogate that. And I can take that now, and I could, if I just wanted to go ahead and propagate that here to the UI, that's one thing. But I could take that error condition or that alert condition and do just about anything I want with it now in order to get it out to folks. Then, some of the other things we've set up were some of the more standard dashboards that you would expect to see. So I want at a glance look of my core resources. So here's CPU, here's memory, here's storage. Here are all the things that I want a quick sort of view of, and who are the top consumers. The next tab really gets interesting for us, and that this is the system availability tab. This is really where, if I've taken an availability rule and I've created it, this is where that's going to be reported on. And so here I can quickly see as it cycles through, it's doing things like pings, it's doing things like logging into SQL, it's doing things like logging into a web page, it's monitoring the availability of the agent and its response. And I'm looking in real time here at these things. So as these tests are being done, it's telling me what the status is, and sort of it will display red if for some reason it doesn't return a response. It will go ahead and let me know what the overall response time is. And you guys probably can't see this cycling because of the GoToWebinar, but it'll tell me what the average response time or what the response time looks like. And if that gets too long, I'll see that here as well, and it will also be set up to alert me. SNMP trap messages, let's assume for a second that you've got this thing receiving SNMP traps, but those traps haven't been associated with an alert. You can see all those traps here. If I want to monitor the registry, so I want to monitor any registry changes that take place, or I want to monitor a specific registry key, I can do that here. And then, as we talked a little bit about, performance management, one of the things that I'm able to do here is look at and interrogate all of the performance counters on my monitored assets. So in this case here, I've developed a couple of charts, and let me go ahead and open one up here that shows you things like processor status for a given set of virtual machines, and it's going to go ahead and render what the processor utilization looks like here. Um, and this is for a given virtual machine, but I could do it across my environment. In this case, I'm doing it for combined demo. If I'm interested in looking at what the average disk queue length look like, so if I look here and look at combined disk queue length for combined. Now, the other piece of this is I can go back a couple of days. So if I want to go back to the 20th, I can go ahead and grab that information and play it back. So it's going to go ahead and play this information back for me over the course of those last 2 days. And as you can see here, it's ticking off the date and time, and I can see as it's happening. And again, I can switch back and forth between these performance graphs and cycle through these things to be able to see in real time what's happening. And of course, when I create these things, once I've actually selected, so if I come over here to the protected virtual machine group that I've created and expand this, once I've selected this performance counter, it's now become eligible to receive alerts on. So I can go in and create a counter alert, tell it what the baseline should be, and anything above that baseline for a certain duration, I can be told, hey, there's a problem, send off an alert condition. And again, it makes it very, very simple to go ahead and start the process of monitoring that environment and getting that environment monitored from a single pane of glass so that you have insight into, again, the hardware, MX, the hypervisor, the applications themselves. So, I've already got monitoring rules in here looking at services. So if a service changes state, but I can customize that alert. So again, we're really sort of trying to provide that end-to-end solution that allows us to really become a proactive availability management tool. And it will act as a nice complement to both MX environments, and with MX environments, it really gives you a competitive advantage, but also in non-MX environments where a customer wants, maybe a level of availability, but isn't ready to make an investment yet in a redundant solution. They can look at this type of monitoring as something that's going to help them minimize risk as it associates with single points of failure. So guys, that's the presentation I had for this afternoon, and I think I wanted to try and be as comprehensive as possible without taking up a full day. I have recorded this, and I've got a couple of questions that looks like have come in here. Let me go ahead and review these real quick. So one of the questions I got is, for example, if we had a split site installation where network congestion was affecting the ability of the service to maintain sync, would it let us know? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. It would indeed do that. So, one of the things you'd want to do is be making sure you're monitoring the switches that the A-Link traffic is flowing through, specifically those ports. But you would certainly be able to monitor on that. We've got some pre-configured alerts that look at the A-Link traffic, but certainly extending that as part of the package, you'd get those managed switches. You'd want to make sure that you were looking at that as well, but you certainly can accomplish that. The back-end architecture in terms of what the agents report into, I think I covered that earlier, but just to recap, it's a SQL Server backend. It can be an existing SQL Server, or we will lay down SQL Server Express if you so choose. And then let me see here. I'm just waiting to see if any other questions come in. So and one of the questions I got here was, relative to sort of remote monitoring. So what happens if you have remote monitoring and you don't want to have, multiple devices coming and going over a WAN to a single reporting engine? You certainly can set up that concept of the master agent, so that everything flows through a single agent and ultimately gets reported up. One of the other questions I had was, can we capture SNMP trap messages from both in band and out of band? So I'm assuming that they mean out of band means the DRAC and in band means the sort of open managed stuff. Absolutely, you can. You can do all of that with this product. The other question I got here, and I think I answered as well, is are you able to go ahead and receive text messages as alerts? The answer there is yes as well. We've got a document that outlines setting up those SMS gateways via the email, so you can go ahead and receive those alerts. So, guys, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the session, and that we're bumping right up against an hour and a half. Again, I did record this, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure we get it out to everybody. All the presentations that you saw here today are going to be available. We've got a process to receive an NFR, so you simply request the NFR through our partner portal like you would an MX NFR. If you want something quick, you can go out and fill out the form and get the 30-day free trial. That's something that it's 30 days from the install, so there's no key that you have to request. It's download and go. If you do have questions, concerns, if you'd like a more in-depth demo, maybe for yourself or members of your technical staff, let us know. We're absolutely committed to making sure that we arm you guys with all of the information that you need in terms of being able to talk to customers about this solution and understand what it is that they're asking for, or understand what it is your partners are asking for as you go out there and do this. Now, we've also put up on both the main website a product page that's got a data sheet and both for MX environments and non-MX environments. And we've put all of that material out on the partner portal as well. But again, if you have any questions, concerns, you can either contact me directly or contact your Marathon regional sales rep. Let them know what you need. Let us know how we can support you. We're also, guys, it's one of those things where we are, ready, willing, and able to work with you. If you have a customer that wants to see a demo of this, we'll jump right in and make sure we've got resources available to help you do that as well. I really appreciate everyone's time today. For everyone that came, let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you again real soon. Thank you.